I wanted to talk about corners as well. Of course, Conor Benn's been with Tony Sims since the start of his career, someone who's guided plenty of fighters down this path. Eubank Jr. has always been interesting, Duke, from a training perspective. He'll have Jonathan Banks for this fight, but of course, he's had his father. He's had Roy Jones, the man who wouldn't fight Steve. He's had Bomac and then switched to Jonathan Banks. What's your thought about that Eubank corner?
Wasn't Roy Jones caught for having substance in the system and banned?
Yeah, absolutely.
Temporarily.
Yeah.
So he's no problem being coached by somebody who's committed that sin, and yet he's attacking Conor for the same mistake or whatever.
This has never been, I'm siding with one over the other. Some of you are probably going to say, maybe Chris didn't know Roy tested positive beats. Maybe he didn't know. He was way before his time. Didn't Chris say to Conor on a Piers Morgan interview that even if you were tied down and injected up the ass with the clofamine, you're still guilty because you shouldn't have let it happen? Well, if that's the case, shouldn't it be Chris's business to know that Roy tested positive?
According to ESPN, Roy Jones Jr. and Richard Hall both tested positive for the testosterone precursor androstenedione after Jones defeated Hall to retain his undisputed World Light Heavyweight Championship in Indianapolis in 2000. Jones insisted his test was the result of ingesting the supplement Ripped Fuel.
This guy has went on a non-stop tirade about Conor Benn using PEDs and being a dirty athlete.
I'm a clean athlete, always have been, and I'm of the opinion Fraser Clark is as well. I would never ever question that. But there was no testing for the fight leading up to it or on the night, which did surprise me.
That's Dave Allen, who fights in a couple of weeks, the rematch with Johnny Fisher, explaining that he wasn't tested by UKAD or VADA for the fight with Fraser Clark, which he lost. That was on the undercard of Eubank Jr. versus Liam Smith 2. Now, this is a pay-per-view event that I purchased. They were asking, is there VADA testing for this? Ben Shalom lets us know that's confidential. Dave wasn't tested by UKAD or VADA. Liam Smith and his trainer McNally said they were maybe tested twice, and they was in the UK all the time during the build-up for this fight. Let's not forget, Chris spent a lot of time in America. He was training in America with Bomac for this fight. If you guys are so inquisitive about honesty, why don't you ask Chris for some receipts who was testing him while he was training for Liam Smith in the second fight? Because UKAD weren't going over to America to test him. Then came back shortly before the fight and done a urine test with UKAD and started bragging, look, I've been tested. Eddie Hearn went in, but because TalkSport, anti-Matchroom, anti-Eddie Hearn, Conor Benn agenda, you didn't listen to anything what Eddie or I was saying. How much times did I tell you about this? Do you think I just pulled it out of the air? No, I've had it sitting here all the time. What about when Eubank was training with Roy in Florida? Who was testing him? He fought Matty Kolbrov at the Barclays Center late 2019. Then 2020, he hooked up with Roy Jones, and he was training with Roy Jones in Florida and didn't fight again until 2021 and hadn't been tested in all that time. Let's just take the last 4 years. Chris was inactive for the whole of 2020, and we know Sky Sports and Boxer, when questioned by Eddie Hearn, would not commit to say their athletes are being tested by UKAD and VADA. And hey, UKAD is horribly underfunded. If you're just using UKAD, you're basically not getting tested. Eddie Hearn's been in public the last 4 years accusing Boxer, accusing Frank Warren, that your fighters are not being double tested by UKAD and VADA. Now, obviously, when Frank had Fury versus Dillian and Fury versus Derek, they had a couple of layers of testing. But we're talking Matchroom doing double layer testing on their domestic cards constantly and costing them a fortune. That's how Conor Benn got himself entangled in his issue. Double layer testing. Who's been tested in the last 4 years more? Chris Eubank or Conor Benn? Conor Benn, Conor Benn, Conor Benn, Conor Benn. Now, this is just an opinion. There's no receipt on this. This is an opinion. I could be wrong. I think Chris is deflecting on Conor to take suspicious eyes off himself. That's what I believe.
Boxing
beats and rhymes.
No one
can do it better.
It's hard to call a fight straight down the line when one of the fighters really brings out the worst in you. You really dislike him. The left side of your brain is almost forced into creative thinking so you can change the narrative. Like, for instance, Ben Whittaker was just too good for Liam Cameron in the rematch. We can argue premature stoppage, but I'm just feeling the overtones that a lot of people didn't want to see Ben Whittaker win this fight, and they were very, very disappointed. Liam Cameron's a good fighter. He even landed some good jabs. That was his best weapon. He has a very good jab from that high guard. He just releases it, and it's hard to see it because he's not telegraphing it with too much backlift. And he caught Whittaker a few times with that jab. His other weapon was the rabbit punch, and then he tried to use his forearm in the second round. He tried to rough Ben Whittaker up, but Ben was on another level. The new partnership with Andy Lee, who is the go-to guy right now, is paying dividends. But before I go over the top, this is a fight he should have took care of last November. In saying that, he's probably learnt more about boxing in himself since that first fight last November. The showboating came back today. Cameron missed the right hand. Whittaker turned and signaled to the crowd, where did that punch go? But he didn't do too much of it. One of the commentators on Sky, while weighing up the fight, where everyone's thinking that Whittaker is going to be under more pressure, he actually said Cameron looks more tense. Once adding to my theory, who is the pressure really on? Liam Cameron, he said himself, there is pressure on him this time. They booed Whittaker in. There is a contingent in this country who really dislike the kid. And I'm not one of them. He tried to get around that high guard by arcing the right hand around Cameron's earmuffs. And he was quite successful with it. Liam Cameron paid by coming in too square and trying to force the pace too early against the physically impressive looking Whittaker. Liam just couldn't build on some of the good jabs he landed, and the fight ran away from him. There were rumours that Whittaker was struggling with the weight, and there was some issue reading what his proper weight was on the scale when he weighed in. But he looked on point physically, like he put the work in. Whittaker took the first round, and in the second, Cameron was feeling the power of them right hands. He said Ben couldn't punch the first time around, and perhaps that worked out in Whittaker's favour in the rematch, as Cameron was coming in very square, and it was just a matter of time before Ben started teeing up them power punches and having success. Cameron was struggling to keep up with the fleet-footed Whittaker. At one stage, while trying to keep up with the footwork, he stumbled off balance. But it didn't take long for Whittaker to start reading Cameron's patterns and was having success timing the jab. Ben caught Cameron with a great right hand, as Cameron took too long to reset to throw his own left, and he never recovered. As Ben followed up, he went to the body with a right left, and Cameron felt them shots. A lot of people spoke of shots being blocked by Cameron. He was hurt. He didn't fire back, and the referees are advised if someone's just taking a pummeling, whether they're blocking or not, and you're not throwing back, they might consider stopping the fight. You got to throw back, and he didn't throw back. The last right hand that Whittaker landed, it shook Liam Cameron, who buckled into the ropes. And as far as I was concerned, it was a great performance by Ben Whittaker. Early stoppage, you could argue that. But it's not Ben Whittaker's problem, is it really? If you perform that well, it's not your problem. Personally, I don't think Liam Cameron was going to get back into the fight. Even if he survived the round, I don't think he was going to get back in. I think it was Ben Whittaker's night. Just a simple case of levels. A lot of people had issues with the stoppage, but what was noticeable is Cameron didn't protest to Howard Foster. He seemed to accept his fate, that he was beaten. I mean, the one person who can tell you if it's a controversial stoppage or not is the fighter who either is storming around the ring, complaining to the referee you stopped it too early, or the one who just accepts that it wasn't his night and he was catching hands. Now, more than likely, by the time I've edited this and I go through my YouTube feed, after Lee Eaton and Frank Warren have had a word with Liam Cameron, he's probably going to tell you that it was stopped too early. And you know what? I wouldn't argue with him. I think they could have let it go on a little further just to avoid all this nonsense here. But it's not the first time Howard Foster has jumped in too early, to be honest. And I have a sneaking suspicion, though there's going to be many not happy with Howard's call, they don't want to see a third fight. This chapter is over. Because of the drama surrounding the first fight and then the rematch, people are perhaps going a little over the top, like Ben Whittaker has beat someone world class. Liam Cameron is not a top 5 British light heavyweight. He's not top 5. And with only 10 fights behind Ben Whittaker, I would argue a couple more 10 rounders, and then he'll have to start going after the Anthony Yards, the Callum Smiths, the Boatzis, Craig Richards. They're talking about Willie Hutchinson next, and I'm going to assume they're going to schedule that for 10. That's a good fight. I could see Ben Whittaker outpointing Anthony Yard right now without much issues. But if he gets caught, who knows? On a talent level, I'm not sure if much of them can hang with Ben Whittaker. But there's all the other variables to weigh up. Stamina, chin, toughness, and more. I hope they make the Willie Hutchinson fight next. That'd be good. He'll win that. There were so many people in my comment section on the Hangout saying the referee should have enforced a standing 8 count. And I was saying there's no standing 8 count in British boxing. And in fact, there hasn't been a standing 8 count in American boxing for probably the last 20 plus years. So you either take a knee or punch back. There is no standing 8 count in British boxing.
A lot of people were saying, was it premature? No, it wasn't premature. The IBF rules state there's no standing 8 count.
Tyson Fury did not get the standing 8 count that many people mentioned in a Hangout against Usyk. Usyk landed a left hook. As Tyson rocked into the ropes, and it was only the ropes that stopped him from falling, it scored a knockdown. The referee administers an 8 count, but it's not a standing 8 count. A very controversial rule that probably robbed a lot of fighters of stoppages.
There's no standing 8 count.
I remember the fight when Quick Tillis was teeing off from Marvis Frazier on the verge of a stoppage. It looked like the referee was about to stop the fight, and then he administered the standing 8, giving Marvis precious seconds to recover. The bell sounded, and Marvis went on to win a unanimous decision. The debate raged on, was Tillis robbed of a stoppage? There is no more standing 8 count in boxing, period. None of the sanctioning bodies use it, and none of the recognised commissions or boards around the world use the standing 8 count. It would be nice to address the incessant online bullying of not just Ben Whittaker, but a lot of celebrities. And you saw the emotion and the hurt come out at the post-press conference. He was in tears. And it has been a barrage of distasteful memes and hatred. I don't think he's that bad a kid. I really don't think he's that bad a kid. I don't think he deserves to be miserable in his life for pursuing his goals. But it is what it is. And he cannot look for people who support a sport where the pursuit of violence and knockouts and money is at stake. He's just got to keep going. Got to toughen up. I'm not saying he's not tough already, but you've got to accept is that boxing is going to take that positive spark away from your life, and maybe you can rekindle that spark after you finish. But his job is to maintain performances like that, not be affected whether the referee should have stopped it earlier or not. If people are dissatisfied, you work with your coach, you go in the ring, you execute. But yeah, it can't be nice for his mother and his old man, or any siblings, or relatives, or his best friend seeing him break down like that. He seems like a positive kid to me. This is just the society we have. People enjoy seeing people on the edge where they could possibly lose their mind. This is entertainment to some people. But yo, the kid, he showed up yesterday. A lot of people disagreed when, in hindsight, post-fight, on a Hangout, I said Liam Cameron shouldn't have took this fight. I didn't really get to finish why I said that, because there was a lot of information coming in and there was comments needed to be read out, and I wasn't fully focused on saying what I was saying the way I wanted it to be said. You see, here's the thing, yeah? Frank Warren is not a guy who does random stuff. That's not Frank Warren. if you are on Frank Warren's staff, anyone you see on Frank Warren's staff, and that includes his sons, if they're not on point and able to pick up the slack what Frank might have missed, you don't work there. And that's from the days of Ernie Fossey, who used to do cuts, training, matchmaking, everything. And then Dean Powell, he replaced Ernie Fossey and was like the psychologist for the fighters, the matchmaker, the trainer. Dean did everything. Ask Derek Chisora about Dean Powell. If Frank Warren tells you not to take a fight, all you have to do is look at the success rate Frank has had developing world champions, British, Commonwealth, European, etc. And when Frank says, don't take the fight, remember, you're paying him to do a job for you. If Frank says don't take the fight, you know what you don't do? You don't take the fight. Because Frank knows what he's doing. Frank knew the first fight was lightning in a bottle. It was unlikely you was going to repeat that result, getting a draw with Ben Whittaker. Why do you think Frank acted like an absolute arsehole over the 10 or 12 rounds? No, Frank had to do a job now. Because you put yourself into a fight where the talent gap is likely to show up where it didn't in the first fight. So now Frank's up to his old tricks trying to unsettle Ben Whittaker. But you see, boxers, young boxers, and Liam's 34, but he's young compared to Frank. You see, people like Liam, and I'm not having a go at Liam, it's a great quality to have. They're led by their heart, but they're not led by all the facts that will tell you a better way to go about this than your heart alone. Frank wasn't caught up with all the people saying, oh, Liam's going to stop him in 2 rounds next time. He's just going to walk through him. Frank wasn't caught up. Frank knew Ben Whittaker was a talented kid. Frank probably wanted to sign Ben Whittaker. Frank's not an idiot. What Frank wanted to do was take Liam Cameron, like Josh Padley on Saturday. After Josh's loss to Shakur Stevenson, he got a contract with Matchroom. Did Matchroom put him into a fight where he was going to get battered? No. They gave him a fight where they could showcase him, acclimatise him to the British audience, and he looked flipping brilliant, did Padders. Well done. What an inspirational story. Frank wanted Liam to get a winnable fight, and then we can talk about a rematch with Ben Whittaker, and we can look at other options. Frank didn't want to sell him out, but next time around, Liam is not going to get the preferential treatment. Frank more than likely is to push him into a fight where it's do or die. Feed him to a prospect. And at 34, with all that expectation, all the people who wanted to see him crush Ben Whittaker and wasn't able to do that, a lot of them who were supporting Liam are not going to be there now. They're gone. You served your purpose. A lot of them only wanted Liam as their guy to destroy Ben Whittaker. Now the realities of the boxing world will be all too clear for Liam to see. And there's some good fights out there for him still. But like the guy said, he was tense. When he was asked in the TalkSport studio, are you going to win? He said, I'm going to try my best. Simon Jordan didn't like the language. I think, you know what Simon Jordan read? You're not a winner, mate. You're not a winner. That's what he read. At first, I didn't pay too much mind. And then I kept looking at Simon's face. And then I started to twig where he was coming from. He was right. And Liam might be in danger of finding out what his level is. And even worse than finding out what your level is accepting that. He took Lyndon Arthur to a majority decision, either last year or late 2023 it was. That's a good result. He didn't look like he belonged in the rematch with Whittaker. I'm just being honest, he didn't look like he belonged. And it didn't look like he believed he belonged. That's the first time he's been stopped. He could perhaps hold on to the narrative that it was prematurely stopped. Me being glass half full, I would hate to see him give up on himself and accept that he's not on that level. But do I see Liam ever being a world title contender? No, not at 34. I do believe there's some good performances left in him though. I do believe that. A few people in a hangout chat said he had to take the payday beats. Well, here's the thing. The payday is always nice. Of course it is. But this is when you have to ask yourself, are you just down for the quick payday? Or are you investing in yourself? Do you believe in yourself to invest in yourself? If the payday's there now and you believe you're good enough, then more than likely the payday will be there in a couple more fights. A bigger payday. But hey, it's not a decision I have to make. He's got family. He's had some very tough times in his life. But the road back will not be easy. We can't cover that up and make light of it. It won't be easy in terms of motivating himself. Not a great weekend for Grant Smith, who trained Liam. He travelled from Sheffield Saturday, where his son was taking the distance by Matthew Germain. Although I thought Dalton looked really good, floored his opponent 3 times. His opponent didn't want to engage. Apparently he got his jaw broken, Matthew, in the 3rd round. Probably that left hook that Dalton decked him with broke his jaw, and he didn't want no part of it. But he was brave, occasionally throwing shots back without ever looking likely that he could make it competitive. And then Dalton and his dad made their way over to Birmingham from Sheffield to see Liam Cameron get brushed aside in 2. But them was the breaks.
These are the breaks!
At least Dalton kept his unbeaten record, finished the fight very strong, wasn't cut, and is ready to go on and take on the winner of Subrael Matthias and Puello. Fights he should be capable of winning. There are a few things I don't like about how Dalton is being trained, and I only realised these 3 things just the other day. I'm not going to divulge right now, or the video is going to go on for hours.